Hi, I just want to clear up a little mistake that I made in my Is the Bible Full of Contradictions video. It refers to the first example of an apparent contradiction I gave, the 28 or 41 scenario, Matthew's genealogy of Jesus Christ going from Jesus through Joseph up to King David lists 28 generations, whereas Luke's, which also appears to go from Jesus through Joseph up to King David, lists 41. Now, if you want to see my explanation there, you're feel free to watch that video. But my basic assumption was that both genealogies went from Jesus through Joseph, Jesus' adoptive father, back through to King David. I now realise, because I've done a bit more study on the subject, thanks to a question one of my, well, it wasn't a subscriber, but someone put to me, and I've looked at, compared the two genealogies more closely, and I've come to the conclusion, actually, that Luke's genealogy doesn't trace the ancestral line of Jesus through Joseph, but through Mary. Now, the reason I made the mistake was, firstly, because Luke himself says in chapter 3 verse 23 that Jesus himself was about 30 years old when he began his ministry. He was the son, says Luke, so it was thought, of Joseph, the son of Heli, H-E-L-I. So that was the first reason I thought it was through Joseph. Now, the second reason is because between Jesus and King David, on both Matthew and Luke's genealogy, there is an overlap, limited, I have to say, to just two names, but in exactly the same order. Luke, let me just find it quickly, lists the two names, excuse me, Zerubbabel and Shealtiel, and he says that Zerubbabel was the son of Shealtiel. Matthew has the same two names and also lists Zerubbabel as the son of Shealtiel. Now, because of that, and because of the thing in verse, the comment Luke makes in verse 23, I naturally thought that the two genealogies went through Joseph. But actually, I was wrong. And the question I asked myself was, were the Shealtiel and Zerubbabel of Luke one and the same, or two and the same people, as the Shealtiel and Zerubbabel of Matthew's Gospel? And when comparing them with the complete genealogical list of David, King David's descendants, that you find in 1 Chronicles 3:10-16, I discovered that they probably weren't. And let me explain. When you compare that list in 1 Chronicles with the list in Matthew 1:7-12, from David down to Zerubbabel, you find that 16 of the names overlap between the two genealogies. The names of Solomon, Rehoboam, Abijah, Asaph or Asa, Jehoshaphat, Amos or Amon, Josiah, Jehoiakim, who's Jeconiah, Shealtiel and Zerubbabel. 16 names, and I think pretty much all of them are listed in that order, the exact same order in the two genealogies. But when comparing the same list in 1 Chronicles with Luke, what I found was the overlap only consisted of two names, that of the said Shealtiel, who was the father of Zerubbabel. Above Shealtiel, in other words his ancestors, there's no overlap whatsoever. Now, the interesting thing is that Luke says that the father of Shealtiel was Neri, N-E-R-I. Now, if Shealtiel's father was Neri, then you would expect to find him somewhere in the complete list that you find in 1 Chronicles chapter 3 verses 10-16. But he's absolutely nowhere to be found. The other interesting thing is that if you look at Luke's genealogy, he traces it not from David through Solomon down, but from David through Nathan, Solomon's brother, down. So it obviously isn't the same genealogical line that Matthew describes in his gospel. It's another genealogy. Now, marriage is a game of two halves, to use an analogy. Joseph is one half, the other half of the marriage is Mary. So whose genealogy is it? If it's not Joseph's, surely it must be Mary's. Well, why does Luke say then that Jesus was the son, so it was thought of Joseph, the son of Heli? Well, the problem isn't so much with that he says that Jesus was the son, so it was thought of Joseph, because of those key words there. So it was thought. It implies that people regarded him as Joseph's son, but in actual fact he wasn't. He was Mary's son, Mary's blood descendant, if you like, not Joseph's. The problem is when it says that Joseph was the son of Heli, H-E-L-I. Now, I did some reading up and some Googling and discovered that, well, a couple of things. Firstly, that in the Jerusalem Talmud, Heli, H-E-L-I, the same Heli of Luke, is referred to as Mary's father, not Joseph's. So there you have an extra biblical source, which is not out in any way to try and corroborate the New Testament, simply because it's Jewish, and as we know, the Jewish religion doesn't accept that Jesus is the Messiah. But we have an extra biblical source here stating that Mary's father was Heli, not Joseph. So why then does Luke say that Heli was Joseph's father? Well, the other thing I discovered was that it was perfectly acceptable in first century Palestine and in first century Jewish culture to refer to one's father-in-law as father and to one's son-in-law as son. And therefore it's perfectly acceptable within that culture for Luke to write that Heli was Joseph's father. Incidentally, in the whole of the Bible, as far as I know, there is no genealogy which records the lineage through the name of a woman, and so again the Bible's just conforming to the culture there and naming Joseph rather than Mary, because genealogies were tended to be lists of the male names. Now, it may also be that Heli had no sons. There are a couple of references in the Bible which lead us possibly to this conclusion, although not definitively. They are, just let me quickly get them, John 19:25 and Matthew 27:56. So it may be that Heli had no sons, only daughters, and that through the law of levirate marriage, which I won't go into just now, there's an article which talks about it if you want to look at it in more depth, but through the law of levirate marriage, Joseph, in marrying Mary, would gain legal status of sonship, or legally become the son of Heli. But that's just another thing to throw in there along the way. Now, this may not seem that important to you. It might seem a bit like splitting hairs or arguing about how many angels you can fit upon a pinhead. That was a serious theological discussion in the Middle Ages, incidentally. But it is important, not just because it shows that there is no contradiction between Luke's genealogy and Matthew's, basically because of different genealogies, but for other reasons as well, to do with Jesus' claim to be the Messiah. I won't go into them here. If you are interested in finding out more about them, do look at Glenn Miller's article. The article is entitled "Response to the Fabulous Prophecies of the Messiah." So that's well worth a read if you want to study this more in depth. If you don't, and you're completely bored to tears by what I'm saying, go and get a handkerchief, blow your nose and dry your eyes, and perhaps go and read a good book. Bye for now.